Step closer. This darkness has teeth. These are the tales where killers thought they buried their secrets, only for the shadows to whisper them back. If you're ready to walk this path, like, comment, and subscribe. Every step keeps the fire alive. The winter wind howled through the hollows of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, carrying the chill of January 1897 as it swept past the modest log cabin on Livesay Mill Road. Elva Zona Heister, a 23-year-old with a lively spirit and auburn hair that framed her freckled face, moved about her small home with the quiet energy of a new bride. She had married Erasmus Edward, Stribling Shoe, just 3 months earlier, a union born of quick courtship after her first husband's death left her widowed and alone. Zona, as her family called her, was known in the close-knit community of Greenbrier for her sharp wit and kind heart, helping neighbors with chores and sharing stories at the general store. Edward, a blacksmith by trade with strong hands scarred from the forge, had swept into her life with promises of stability, his blue eyes and easy charm masking the temper that simmered. Their cabin, tucked among the rolling hills and dense woods, was a simple place, a stone fireplace for warmth, a kitchen table for shared meals, and a bedroom where Zona dreamed of a future with children. But on that fateful morning of January 23rd, Edward left early for his shop in the nearby town of Stokes, kissing Zona goodbye with a tenderness that felt routine, leaving her to tend the house alone. Zona spent the day in quiet tasks, sweeping the floors, mending a quilt by the fire, her thoughts drifting to the baby she suspected she might be carrying, a secret joy she planned to share with Edward that evening. Around noon, she felt a sudden weakness, a dizzy spell that sent her to the bedroom for rest, the cabin silent except for the crackle of embers. By evening, when Edward returned from work, he found her unresponsive on the floor near the bed, her body cold, her breathing gone. Panic gripped him as he lifted her gently, carrying her to the bed and covering her with a quilt, his mind racing with grief and confusion. He ran to fetch Dr. George W.W.A. Knapp, the local physician, who lived a mile away, his boots pounding the frozen ground as he burst into the doctor's home with the news. Zona had fallen down the stairs and broken her neck. Knapp, roused from his supper, hurried back with Edward, examining the body by lantern light in the dim cabin. He noted bruises on her neck, but attributed them to the fall, signing the death certificate for cervical fracture, natural causes from an accident. No autopsy was ordered in that rural corner of West Virginia, where such things were rare for a young woman, and Edward prepared for burial, his sorrow seeming genuine to those who saw him. Word spread quickly through Greenbrier, the community gathering at the cabin the next day, January 24th, to pay respect. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, a sturdy woman of 50 with weathered hands from years of farm work, arrived with her husband, John, her face lined with worry as she entered the home. Mary Jane had never fully trusted Edward, sensing a darkness in his quick marriage to her daughter after Zona's first husband, Trout Shoe, died under mysterious circumstances. She knelt by the bed, stroking Zona's cold cheek, whispering prayers as tears fell, but something felt wrong. The quilt draped oddly over Zona's head, Edward hovering protectively, refusing to let it be moved. Neighbors murmured about the suddenness, but Edward's story held, the doctor's certificate sealing it as accident. The funeral was set for January 26th at the local Methodist church, the small wooden building filled with mourners as Zona's pine coffin was carried in, Edward walking behind with a somber gait. Mary Jane sat in the front pew, her eyes fixed on the casket, her heart heavy with unspoken doubt. That night, alone in her simple farmhouse a few miles away, grief overtook her, and she prayed fervently for answers, her pleas echoing in the quiet room until sleep came fitfully. In the depths of night, Mary Jane dreamed vividly, Zona appearing before her as a glowing figure, her face pale but clear, her voice soft yet urgent. "Mother," she said, "Edward killed me." The spirit recounted the horror, Edward's rage over a minor slight, his hands around her throat in the kitchen, squeezing until darkness came, then carrying her body upstairs to stage the fall. Zona's apparition spoke of the baby she carried, lost in the violence, her neck broken not by stairs, but by her husband's fury. Mary Jane awoke with a start, her nightgown damp with sweat, the vision lingering like a chill. For 4 nights the ghost returned, each time revealing more, the bruises hidden under high collars, Edward's jealousy that turned possessive, the way he isolated her from friends. Convinced it was divine truth, Mary Jane marched to the magistrate the next morning, her voice trembling but firm as she demanded the body be exhumed. The coroner, Jacob P. Hevner, skeptical at first of the supernatural tale, agreed to investigate, the community buzzing with whispers of the Greenbrier ghost as news spread. Edward, hearing of the exhumation order, scoffed at superstition, but unease crept into his eyes as workers prepared the grave on January 28th. The exhumation unfolded under a gray sky, the coffin lifted from the frozen earth at the Zion Episcopal Church Cemetery, Zona's body brought to the undertakers for autopsy. Dr. Knapp and 2 other physicians, joined by the coroner, examined her carefully, their lanterns casting shadows on the embalmed form. What they found shattered the accident story. Her neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae, a rare injury more consistent with strangulation than a fall. Bruises around the throat fresh and finger-shaped. No broken bones from tumbling downstairs. Elise, the windpipe crushed, the hyoid bone fractured. Signs of manual asphyxiation clear to the trained eyes. The jury of inquest, 6 local men, deliberated briefly before ruling homicide by strangulation, the ghost's testimony cited in the official record as Mary Jane's sworn account. Edward was arrested that afternoon, led away in irons to the Lewisburg jail, his blacksmith's hammer left behind in his shop. The town reeled, tales of the spectral visitation spreading like wildfire. Mary Jane hailed as a seer by some, a meddling mother by others. Edward's trial loomed in February, the courtroom in Lewisburg, packed with spectators, the air thick with anticipation as the ghost story gripped the nation. The prosecution built its case on the autopsy, Mary Jane's testimony, the emotional core, her voice steady as she recounted the 4 visitations, Zona's spirit describing the murder in vivid detail, the argument over supper, Edward's hands closing like a vice, his whispered threats of silence. Defense attorneys argued hysteria, Mary Jane's grief, fabricating the visions, the bruises from a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Edward took the stand, his broad frame filling the box, denying violence with a blacksmith's straightforwardness. Zona slipped on the stairs while carrying wood. He tried to catch her, but failed. But the medical evidence held firm, the dislocation impossible from a simple fall, the bruises too precise. Jurors, farmers, and merchants who knew the family weighed the supernatural against science, but the autopsy tipped the scales. On March 1897, guilty of murder in the second degree, sentenced to life in the West Virginia Penitentiary at Moundsville. Edward died there in 1900 of natural causes, his grave unmarked, the ghost's justice served. Mary Jane lived until 1916, her story retold in newspapers and books. The Greenbrier Ghost becoming folklore, a tale of maternal love transcending death. Greenbrier County moved on, the cabin demolished, the hollows whispering of Zona's unrest, her spirit said to wander the roads on winter night. The case, one of America's first ghost trials, inspired plays and novels. Mary Jane's courage a beacon for grieving mother. Zona's unmarked grave in the churchyard grew wildflowers, a quiet memorial to a young woman whose voice from beyond exposed a killer's hand. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. The autumn air was crisp in Lakewood, Washington, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth as twilight settled over the quiet suburban street. It was October 16, 2022, and Che Kyung-an, a 53-year-old nurse with a gentle smile and tired eyes, drove to a local park to meet her estranged husband, Young An, for what she thought was a civil handoff of divorce papers. Their marriage, once filled with promise, had unraveled over years of arguments, his controlling nature clashing with her quiet strength. Che, dressed in a navy sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back, sat on a bench, her Apple Watch glinting on her wrist, a gift from her daughter for tracking her run. Young, 53, arrived in his black SUV, his face calm but his eyes hard, a storm brewing beneath his composed exterior. They exchanged clipped words, the tension thick as he insisted she signed documents there, away from lawyers. Che sensed danger, her instincts sharpened by months of his escalating threats. Texts about her never leaving him, voicemails that chilled her. As she turned to walk away, Young grabbed her arm, his grip iron tight, and forced her into his vehicle, the park empty except for a distant jogger who didn't notice. He bound her wrists with duct tape, wrapping it around her mouth to silence her screams, her muffled cries lost in the hum of the engine as he sped toward a remote stretch of woods near Tacoma. The drive felt endless, the SUV bouncing along a dirt road flanked by towering evergreens, the headlights cutting through the gathering dark. Che's heart pounded, her breath shallow against the tape, but her mind raced, focusing on the watch still strapped to her wrist. Young, focused on the road, didn't notice as she pressed her thumb against the side button, activating the emergency SOS feature she'd learned about during a hospital safety training. The watch dialed 911 at 6:47 p.m., the call connecting silently, her moans and stifled screams carrying through the line. The dispatcher, hearing the distress, triangulated the signal to a rural area outside Lakewood, alerting Pierce County Sheriff's deputies who issued an immediate Amber Alert and Bola for Che, a 5'4" Korean-American woman, last seen with her husband, considered armed and dangerous. Young caught the faint glow of the wash face, his rage erupting as he ripped it from her wrist, smashing it against the dashboard. The call cut off after 23 seconds. He didn't stop, driving deeper into the forest, where the trees swallowed sound and light, his plan unfolding with chilling precision. Che, bound and gagged, felt the weight of his silence, her body trembling, but her will unbroken, her thoughts on her daughter waiting at home. In the heart of the woods, under a moonless sky, Young stopped the SUV near a clearing, dragging Che out, her feet stumbling over roots and leaves. He had prepared a shallow grave, barely 3 feet deep, lined with a tarp to hide his work. His hands rough, he forced her to the ground, her eyes wide with terror as he shoveled dirt over her, the earth cold and heavy, sealing her in darkness. Che clawed at the soil, her bound hands scraping, her lungs burning as she fought for air, the tape loosening just enough to let out faint gasps. Young, certain she'd suffocate, drove off to dispose of the watch, leaving her buried alive, the forest silent, except for the rustle of leaves. Hours passed, the night stretching into the early morning of October 17th, and Chi's strength wavered, but didn't break. Her fingers, bloody from digging, found a gap in the tarp, pushing through to loose dirt, her body fueled by desperation and the thought of her daughter's face. Around 2 a.m., she broke free, gasping for air, her clothes torn, her face smeared with mud. She staggered through the woods, branches snagging her sweater, until she reached a rural road, lights glowing from a small house in the distance. The homeowners, an elderly couple named the Thompsons, were awake, unable to sleep after seeing the Amber Alert on their phones. A photo of Che, her kind eyes unmistakable even in distress. When she pounded on their door at 2:15 a.m., her voice hoarse from screaming, they recognized her instantly, her face bruised but alive. "Help me, he buried me," she rasped, collapsing into their arms as they dialed 911, their voices urgent as they relayed her location. Deputies arrived within minutes, wrapping Che in a blanket, her body shivering but her spirit defiant as she recounted the ordeal. Young's ambush, the tape, the grave. The Thompsons offered her water, their dog nuzzling her hand, a small comfort as medics checked her for injuries, cuts, bruises, and dehydration, but miraculously no broken bone. Police issued a statewide alert for Young, his SUV spotted by a highway camera near Olympia, 40 miles away. A SWAT team descended on a motel where he checked in under a false name, finding him asleep. A loaded .38 revolver on the nightstand, Che's smashed Apple Watch in his back. He surrendered without a fight, his face blank, offering no explanation as cuffs snapped around his wrists. Lakewood buzzed with the news, the community stunned by the brutality in their quiet town of 60,000. Che's daughter, Hannah, 19, rushed to the hospital, sobbing as she hugged her mother, who recounted her escape through tears, crediting the watch and her will to survive. The Pierce County Sheriff's Department pieced together the timeline. The 911 call a critical clue that had mobilized the search. Cell tower data confirmed Young's SUV movements, pinging from the park to the forest, then the motel. The grave site, found at dawn, yielded duct tape fragments with Che's DNA and Young's fingerprints, the tarp bearing his boot prints. Prosecutors charged him with attempted murder, kidnapping, and domestic violence. The case, airtight with the watch's call log, recovered despite the damage, showing the COS activation. Che's testimony, delivered in a hospital gown, was raw. She described Young's growing anger during their divorce talks, his threats to end it all if she left, his obsession with keeping her tied to him. The Amber Alert, broadcast to thousands, had kept the community vigilant. The Thompsons' quick action sealing Young's fate. The trial, held in Tacoma's Pierce County Superior Court, starting March 2023, gripped the region. Prosecutor Mary Robnett presented the 911 audio, Che's muffled cries piercing the courtroom, jurors visibly shaken. The Apple Watch displayed in an evidence bag, became a symbol of survival, its cracked screen a testament to her fight. Che took the stand, her voice steady despite the trauma, detailing the burial, the suffocating dirt, her hands clawing for freedom. "I thought of Hannah," she said, tears falling. "I couldn't let him win." Young's defense claimed mental instability, arguing he'd snapped under divorce stress, but his calm demeanor at the motel undercut their plea. Witnesses, including a co-worker who'd seen Young stalk Che at the hospital, painted a picture of calculated rage. The jury deliberated for 5 hours, convicting Young on all counts on April 7, 2023. Judge Susan Adams sentenced him to 25 years, calling his act a betrayal of humanity. Che in the gallery clutched Hannah's hand, her relief palpable as Young was led away, his eyes never meeting hers. Lakewood carried the scars, its residents locking doors tighter, but Che's story inspired. She returned to nursing, speaking at domestic violence shelters, her Apple Watch replaced, but kept as a reminder of her strength. Hannah started a fundraiser for abuse survivors, raising $50,000 in months. The forest clearing, once a grave, became a quiet memorial, locals leaving flowers where Che escaped. The case, featured on a 2024 Dateline episode titled Buried Alive, captivated audiences. Keith Morrison's narration, highlighting the watch's role, the 911 called replayed to millions. True crime forums buzzed, Reddit users praising Che's courage, some calling her a tech-savvy hero. Young, in Walla Prison, faded into obscurity, his appeals pending but weak. Che rebelled, her bond with Hannah unbreakable, the woods a distant memory of a night she turned survival into triumph. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of the Powell family home in West Valley City, Utah, casting a soft glow on the living room, shelves lined with books and family photos. It was July 29, 2008, and Susan Powell, a 28-year-old financial planner with a warm smile and determined eyes, held a small video camera in her hands, her voice steady as she panned across the room. Dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, her blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail, she documented every detail. The couch where her sons Charlie and Braden played, the kitchen table cluttered with bills, the computer desk stacked with papers. "This is our home inventory," she said into the lens, her tone matter-of-fact, but laced with an undercurrent of urgency. "In case something happens to me or my family, this will help." She moved to the bedroom, filming closets and drawers, noting values of clothes and jewelry, her words careful, almost scripted. Friends later recalled Susan's growing unease in her marriage, her whispers about Josh's controlling ways, his late nights, and the way he monitored her every move. The video wasn't just for insurance, it was a lifeline, a quiet act of foresight born from fear she dared not voice aloud. She ended the recording with a final sweep of the boys' room, their toys scattered like innocent dreams, before tucking the tape away in a drawer, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. Susan's days were a delicate balance, juggling her job at J. Morgan Chase, where she analyzed investments with the demands of motherhood, to Charlie, 4 years old, with his father's dark hair and a boundless curiosity, and Braden, 2, with his mother's bright eyes and infectious giggle. The Powell home on White's Fort Road was a modest 2-story affair, bought with Susan's steady income, while Josh pursued fleeting business ideas like painting houses or inventing gadgets that never took off. Josh, tall and intense with a quick temper hidden behind a charming facade, had met Susan in college, their shared Mormon faith drawing them together in what she hoped would be a partnership of equals. But marriage revealed cracks. Josh's jealousy flared at her work friendships. His finances drained family savings on failed ventures, and arguments escalated into cold silences that left Susan isolated. She confided in her best friend, Kiara, during a rare lunch break, about Josh's threats to take the boys if she left, his insistence on family loyalty above all. Susan dreamed of escape, saving money in a secret account, researching divorce laws late at night when Josh slept. The home video was one piece of her plan, a digital will that captured not just assets, but the essence of her life, a message for those she loved if the worst came true. By December 2009, the tensions had frayed to break it. Susan, ever the planner, had started therapy. Her sessions focused on coping with Josh's moods, his father Stephen's unsettling presence nearby, with his odd comments about her beauty. Christmas approached, the house strung with lights and the scent of pine filling the air, but Susan's smiles fell forth. On December 6th, a Sunday night heavy with winter chill, the family gathered for dinner, pancakes sizzling on the griddle as Giovanna, a neighbor, joined them, her visit a brief spark of normalcy. Susan complained of a headache, retiring early to bed around 5 p.m., while Josh played with the boys downstairs. Giovanna left at 8:30 p.m., waving goodbye to Josh, who mentioned a spontaneous camping trip to the desert, an odd plan for 50-degree cold. Around midnight, Josh bundled Charlie and Braden into the minivan, claiming Susan was asleep and would be fine. He drove to Simpson Springs, 160 miles away. The boys bundled in blankets, their small forms asleep as the headlights cut through the dark highway. But Susan was gone when he returned the next afternoon. Her purse, keys, and ID still in the house, her Toyota untouched in the driveway. Josh's story to police was calm, almost detached. He'd gotten lost in the desert. His phone died, and Susan must have left on her own, perhaps upset. West Valley City awoke to worry on December 7th, Susan's absence rippling through her workplace and church. Co-workers called her parents, Chuck and Judy Cox in Puyallup, Washington, who drove through the night, their hearts pounding with dread. Police arrived at the Powell home, finding Josh composed, the boys quiet but confused, asking for Mommy. Detectives noted odd details, the carpet in the living room damp, 2 fans blowing on it as if drying a spill, Josh's hands scratched, the minivan suspiciously clean after a desert trek. Susan's bank showed no withdrawals, her phone silent since the night before. Josh suggested she might have run off with another man, a claim that stunned her friends who knew her devotion to her son. The home video surfaced during the search, found in the drawer by an officer. Its contents played in a quiet room, Susan's voice filling the space with eerie prescience. "If I die, it may not be an accident," she said. In one segment, her eyes meeting the camera directly, a chill running through the investigators. The tape became evidence, Susan's words a posthumous accusation, though Josh dismissed it as paranoia from marital stress. The investigation intensified, West Valley PD treating it as a missing persons case, but with homicide undertones. Searches of the desert yielded nothing but Josh's tire tracks, no campsite, no sign of Susan. Polygraph tests were offered, but Josh refused, hiring a lawyer and moving the boys to his father's home in Washington State, away from Utah's scrutiny. The Coxes fought for custody, their pleas falling on deaf ears at first, but Child Protective Services, CPS, stepped in, alarmed by Josh's behavior. Interviews with Charlie revealed fragments. Daddy's angry voice, Mommy sad, but nothing concrete. Susan's journal, discovered hidden in a book, detailed Josh's rages, his threats to disappear with the boys, her fears for her safety. Her fears for her safety. Friends testified to her plans to leave, her secret emails to a divorce attorney. Josh's financial desperation emerged. He'd taken loans against the house, his inventions failing, Susan's income, the family's lifeline. Rumors swirled of an affair, but no proof, just Josh's accusations to deflect. The video played in media interviews, Susan's face on every news channel, her message haunting, assets listed, but her life the true inventory, a woman preparing for the unthinkable. Months dragged into 2010, the case gripping Utah and beyond. Documentaries in the works, the Powell name synonymous with mystery. Josh cooperated superficially, granting interviews where he teared up, pleading for Susan's return, but his eyes darted, his story shifting. The Coxes rallied supporters, vigils lighting the streets, posters of Susan's smiling face everywhere. CPS granted supervised visitation for the boys, their interviews with therapists revealing more. Charlie drawing pictures of fire and a sad mom. Josh's father, Stephen, faced his own scandals, child porn charges in 2011, exposing his dark side. Journals filled with fantasies about Susan. The family dynamic cracked wide. Josh's loyalty to his father blinding him to red flags. On February 5th, 2012, during a supervised visit at a rental home in South Hill, Washington, Josh arrived with the boys, Charlie 8 and Braden 4, their small hands in his. The social worker, Elizabeth Hall, waited outside, but Josh locked the doors, barricading inside. Alarms rang as smoke billowed, the house erupting in flames. Josh's body found with the boys, carbon monoxide, and a blade confirming murder-suicide. He had slashed their throats, then his own. The boys' small forms curled together, their final moments a horror beyond words. The nation reeled, the Coxes shattered, their grandsons gone, Susan still missing. Fire investigators confirmed accelerants. Josh's note blaming the world. No remorse for Susan. The video resurfaced. Susan's voice a ghost in court documents. Her assets irrelevant now. Her foresight a tragic echo. Searches for her body continued. Tips leading to mines and lakes, but nothing. Josh's brother Michael, suspected of helping cover up, took his life in 2013, jumping from a garage. The case closed unsolved. Susan's disappearance pinned on Josh, but unproven, without a body. The Coxes fought on, their home a shrine to Susan and the boys. Photos and the videotape playing on anniversaries. West Valley remembered, the house sold, its walls holding secrets. Susan's legacy lived in advocacy, her story warning of domestic traps, her video a beacon of courage in the dark. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. The summer sun hung low over the rolling hills of Mountains, a picturesque village perched above the French Riviera, where lavender fields swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant hum of Cannes glamour felt a worlds away. It was June 23, 1991, and Ghislaine Marshall, a 65-year-old widow of refined elegance, moved through her villa with the quiet grace of someone who had known both privilege and loss. Born Ghislaine de Rennie into a family of industrialists, she had inherited wealth from her father, a resistance hero deported during the war, and lived in a sprawling estate called Le Chaumet, all its stone walls enclosing a life of solitude after her husband's death. Ghislaine, with her silver hair neatly pinned and her dresses always pressed, spent her days tending to her garden, reading French classics, and occasionally chatting with neighbors over tea. She employed a small staff, including Omar Radat, a 27-year-old Moroccan immigrant who had come to France seeking work, his strong hands perfect for pruning roses and hauling soil. Omar, illiterate and speaking halting French, was a gentle soul, known in the village for his shy smile and reliable labor. He lived in a modest room on the property, earning a modest wage that he sent home to his family in Morocco. That afternoon, Ghislaine had mentioned to a friend that Omar would be working late, repairing a door in the villa's annex, a detail that would later haunt the investigation. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, Ghislaine descended to the cellar of the annex, perhaps to fetch a bottle of wine or check on stored linen, unaware that the quiet of her home was about to shatter into violence. The attack unfolded in the dim confines of the cellar, a space cluttered with old furniture and dusty shelves, the air cool and musty. Ghislaine, surprised by an intruder, fought fiercely, her nails scratching at arms, her voice echoing off the stone walls as she cried out. The assailant, fueled by rage or desperation, struck her repeatedly with a sharp tool, perhaps a garden knife or a shard of glass, inflicting over a dozen wounds to her face, hands, and body. Blood sprang across the floor in a grim tableau. She staggered, her strength fading, but in her final moments, she dipped her fingers into the warm pool and scrawled messages on the door in her own blood. Omar Matur on one panel and a partial Omar Mati on another. The letters, shaky but deliberate. The grammar was off. Tour should have been Tour. A mistake that would ignite endless debate, but the accusation was clear. Ghislaine collapsed behind a makeshift barricade of a folding bed and metal tube, blocking the door from the inside. Her body curled in agony until death claimed her. The killer fled, leaving the villa eerily silent, the messages drying into a macabre testament. Upstairs, the house remained untouched, no signs of forced entry, suggesting someone familiar with the layout had slipped in unnoticed. The next day dawned bright, but Ghislaine missed a lunch date with her friend Francine, a detail that set off alarms. Francine, worried after calls went unanswered, contacted the police around noon on June 24th. Gendarmes from the nearby Mougins station arrived at Le Chaumet, their knocks echoing unanswered through the grand hall. They circled the property, noting Omar's absence. He had reported for work that morning but left early, claiming a family errand, and forced open the annex door after spotting blood seeping from beneath it. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. Ghislaine's body, battered and bloodied, lay in the locked cellar, the bloody inscription stark against the white paint. Omar Matur, the word seemed to scream, pointing straight to the absent gardener. Officers secured the scene, their faces paling at the brutality, and immediately issued an alert for Omar Radat. The villa, once a haven of tranquility, became a crime scene, swarming with investigators, forensic teams dusting for prints, photographing the messages, and collecting blood samples. Ghislaine's family, notified in Cannes, arrived in shock. Her brother Pierre de Renty, weeping as he identified her, his voice breaking over the injustice of it all. The messages written in her blood were confirmed by initial tests, and Omar's name burned into every mind, the only Omar Ghislaine knew. Omar was apprehended that evening in Nice, about 30 miles away, at his sister's home, where he had gone to borrow money for a family matter in Morocco. He was calm but confused, insisting he had left Le Chaumet around 3 p.m. the previous day. After fixing the door, his alibi backed by a receipt from a phone call he made to his wife at 4:15 p.m. Handcuffed and bewildered, Omar couldn't read the charges read to him, his illiteracy a barrier that would later fuel cries of injustice. Brought back to Magen's, he was interrogated in a small room at the gendarmerie, his broken French stumbling over denials. "I didn't kill Madame. She was good to me." But the messages loomed large, and prosecutors, led by the ambitious, nice public prosecutor, built their case around. Omar's fingerprints were absent from the cellar, no murder weapon tied to him, but the accusation in blood was deemed irrefutable. The initial pathology report, filed hastily, pegged the time of death as June 24, aligning with Omar's supposed work schedule, but whispers of a possible error began almost immediately. Ghislaine's neighbors, like the elderly couple next door, reported hearing nothing unusual, no screams or struggles adding to the puzzle. The villa's layout, a main house connected to the annex by a garden path, suggested the killer knew the grounds well, perhaps an insider or someone Ghislaine trusted enough to let in. As news spread through the Riviera, the affair gripped France, tabloids splashing headlines like Omar Mature across front pages, the phrase becoming a national catchphrase for betrayal and mystery. Ghislaine's high society connections, her family ties to old money and wartime heroism, contrasted sharply with Omar's immigrant status, stirring undercurrents of xenophobia. In Magen's, a town of artists and retirees, whispers turned to outright suspicion of the Arab gardener, prejudices bubbling to the surface. Omar's defense, initially handled by a court-appointed lawyer, scrambled to poke holes. The grammatical error in the message, tour instead of toué, was unlikely for an educated woman like Ghislaine, who spoke flawless French. Graphologists were called, their analyses divided. Some said it matched her handwriting, others deemed it impossible, the strokes too steady for someone bleeding out. The barricaded door puzzled experts. How could Omar have locked it from inside and escaped? Theories swirled, a hidden exit, or perhaps Ghislaine herself blocked it after the killer fled. Omar's illiteracy became a double-edged sword. He couldn't have forged the message, but prosecutors argued he forced her to write it. The media frenzy peaked with interviews from Ghislaine's friends, who described her as kind but lonely, vulnerable in her isolated villa. Omar's family in Morocco rallied, sending pleas to the French embassy, but the narrative of the guilty immigrant took hold. The investigation dragged into months, forensic teams combing the cellar for clues. Blood analysis confirmed the messages were Ghislaine's, but trace DNA, crude by 1991 standards, yielded nothing conclusive. A hair found near the body didn't match Omar, hinting at another presence, but it was dismissed as contamination. Omar's shoes, tested for soil from the cellar, showed no match, though particles suggested he had been there days earlier for legitimate work. Witnesses placed him leaving the property early on the 23rd, buying groceries in a village shop, his demeanor relaxed. Yet the prosecutor's office, under pressure to close the case, charged Omar with premeditated murder, alleging a dispute over unpaid wages sparked the rage. Ghislaine's maid, who hadn't worked that day, testified to tensions, claiming Omar grumbled about money, but her memory was fuzzy. The date of death became a flashpoint. The original report said June 24th, when Omar was supposedly on site, but pathologists later corrected it to the 23rd, citing a typing error, a change that smelled of convenience to skeptics. Omar's alibi for the 24th, visiting his sister, held firm, but for the 23rd, it was shakier, relying on his word alone. As pretrial hearings unfolded in Nice, the affair transcended crime, becoming a symbol of class divide, immigrant struggles, and judicial bias. The trial opened on January 24, 1994, in the grand courtroom of the Alpes Maritimes Assizes, a theater of justice packed with reporters, Ghislaine's family in the front rows, their faces etched with sorrow. Omar, dressed in a simple suit provided by supporters, sat flanked by lawyers Jacques Vergès, a flamboyant defender of controversial figures, and a younger associate. Vergès, with his theatrical flair, immediately framed the case as a modern Dreyfus affair, accusing the system of anti-Arab prejudice. The presiding judge, Dominique Tricot, drew ire with a remark to Omar in broken Arabic. Anyone who cannot read or write should hide themselves away in a hole, a comment that ignited outrage and calls for recusal. Prosecutors presented the messages as the smoking gun, parading enlarged photos of the bloody scrawls, arguing Ghislaine's dying act accused her killer. Expert witnesses testified the handwriting was hers, 2/3 certain, a vague probability that Vergès shredded on cross-examination, highlighting the grammatical blunder. An educated widow wouldn't misuse the past participle. Ghislaine's life was dissected. Her charity work, her isolation, her trust in staff, painting Omar as the ungrateful outsider who turned violent over a petty slight. Omar took the stand, his voice soft and accented, denying any involvement, tears welling as he described Ghislaine as like a mother. He recounted his day, arriving at 9 a.m., pruning bushes, fixing the annex door by noon, pruning bushes, leaving by 3 p.m. for a family call. No blood on his clothes, no weapon in his possession, his hands calloused from honest labor. But the prosecution hammered his illiteracy as motive. Perhaps Ghislaine mocked him, or he feared exposure of a theft. Alibis were scrutinized. A shopkeeper confirmed seeing him, but timing was off by minutes. The barricade theory faltered. Experts said it could be pushed from outside with effort, but Omar's build made it implausible alone. Whispers of accomplices surfaced, perhaps other Moroccans in the area, jealous of Omar's job, but nothing stuck. The media circus outside swelled, protesters waving signs for justice, intellectuals like Simone Weil decrying the trial's biases. Ghislaine's brother, Pierre, testified, his voice trembling, insisting Omar was the only suspect. The messages his sister's final truth. After weeks of testimony, the jury retired, the courtroom tense with anticipation. On February 2nd, 1994, the verdict landed like a thunderclap. Guilty of murder, 18 years imprisonment. Omar collapsed, sobbing, as Vergesh shouted injustice to the gallery. The sentence, lighter than life due to no prior record, felt like a lifetime to Omar, separated from his family, branded a killer. France erupted, marches in Paris, editorials in Le Monde questioning the evidence. The phrase Omar Mature spray painted on walls as a cry against racism. Ghislaine's family grieved quietly, believing justice served, but doubts lingered even among them. Omar entered Fleury-Mérogis prison, his days a grind of isolation, learning to read in secret, clinging to innocence. Appeals failed, but international pressure mounted. Morocco's king, Hassan II, appealing personally to President Jacques Chirac. In 1996, a partial pardon shortened his term. By 1998, full release on good behavior, but no exoneration. Omar remained a convicted murderer, his name stained. Life outside was bittersweet. Omar returned to Morocco, working odd jobs, marrying, fathering children, but the affair shadowed him. Books poured out. Omar, The Construction of a Guilty Man by Jean-Marie Roy, his own lead, fueling public debate. The 2011 film Omar Mature, starring Rushdie Zem as Omar, reignited interest, portraying the trial's prejudices. DNA retests in 2000s found traces from 4 unknown males at the scene. None Omar's, but contamination was blamed. In 2015, advanced analysis confirmed unknown DNA on the messages, sparking a revision request. By 2021, nearly 30 years later, a Paris court agreed to review the grammatical error and DNA Central. Hearings dragged, experts clashing. Some said the writing was forged, others upheld it. Ghislaine's niece, Sabine Dugranroux, fought back, insisting on Omar's guilt, the family weary of media revivals. In October 2022, the Court of Cassation denied retrial, closing the book, though Omar vowed to appeal to Europe. Majans moved on. Le Chaumet sold, its cellars sealed, but the villa whispered of unanswered questions, a widow's bloodied plea, echoing in French memory. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadow. The summer night in Little River, South Carolina, wrapped around the quiet neighborhood like a warm blanket, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and distant ocean salt. It was July 16, 2005, and Charlie Parker, a 66-year-old retired police chief, sat in his favorite armchair in the living room of their modest brick home on Deerfield Drive. His wife, Diane, 58, moved about the kitchen, her laughter floating through the house as she prepared a late snack. The couple's easy companionship, a testament to 35 years of marriage. Their daughter Bambi, 34, lived nearby with her boyfriend Rick Gagnon, but the Parkers' home was their sanctuary, filled with family photos, Charlie's old badges, and a cherished family Bible on the coffee table. Its pages worn from generations of inscriptions. Charlie, with his salt and pepper hair and steady gaze, had served as Georgetown County Sheriff for years, his reputation for fairness earning him respect even in retirement. Diane, a school teacher known for her kindness, had just finished grading papers, her glasses perched on her nose. Around 10:30 p.m., a noise from the back door caught Charlie's ear, a soft creak, almost lost in the hum of the air conditioner. He rose, his hand instinctively reaching for the .38 revolver he kept nearby, but it was too late. 2 intruders, masked and armed, burst through, their shadows long in the hallway light. The attack was savage and calculated. The men, one tall and wiry, the other stocky with a tattoo peeking from his sleeve, demanded money, their voices muffled but urgent. Charlie, ever the lawman, lunged forward, his revolver firing a single shot that grazed the taller man's arm before a bullet from the intruder's 9mm pistol struck him in the chest. He collapsed against the wall, blood staining his shirt, his eyes wide with shock. Diane screamed from the kitchen, rushing to his side, but the stocky man grabbed her, slamming her head against the counter, her body crumpling as he fired point blank into her back. The shots echoed through the house, 3 in total, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. The intruders ransacked drawers, grabbing cash, jewelry, and whatever else caught their eye, about $7,000 worth, including Diane's diamond earrings and Charlie's watch. They fled into the night, leaving the back door ajar, the family's dog barking furiously from its kennel outside. Bambi, asleep at her home a mile away, woke to a neighbor's call at 11:15 p.m., her heart sinking as she raced to her parents' house, finding police tape already fluttering in the breeze. The scene was heartbreaking. Officers from the Horry County Police Department arrived within minutes, their flashlights sweeping the blood-smeared floors. Charlie's body still in the living room. Diane's in the kitchen, her hand outstretched as if reaching for him. The medical examiner later confirmed the wounds. Charlie shot once in the heart, Diane twice, once in the back and once in the head, the brutality suggesting more than a random theft. Neighbors whispered about the Parkers' kindness, how they'd never locked their doors, trusting their quiet community. But detectives saw signs of staging, the drawers dumped hastily, no forced entry beyond the unlocked door. Charlie's revolver lay nearby, its single spent casing a sign he'd fought back. The family Bible, heavy with history, sat untouched on the table, its leather cover inscribed with births, deaths, and marriages dating back to the 1800s. Bambi sobbed as she identified her parents, Rick holding her close, their grief raw amid the flashing light. The investigation kicked off with vigor, canvassing the neighborhood, collecting fingerprints smudged on a glass Diane had poured water into earlier, but leads were thin. The masked men ghosts in a town where strangers stood out. Weeks turned to months, the case growing cold as summer faded into fall. Bambi and Rick leaned on each other, their relationship strengthening in the shadow of loss. But whispers began, rumors of financial troubles, old grudges from Charlie's sheriff days. Detectives interviewed friends, combing through Charlie's past cases, but nothing stuck. Then tragedy struck again. On October 5th, 2005, just 3 months later, Rick Gagnon was found shot in his truck on a rural road near Conway, his body slumped over the wheel, a single bullet to the head. Bambi discovered him, her screams echoing the nightmare of that July night. The scene mirrored the Parkers. No signs of struggle, a wallet emptied of cash, suggesting a robbery. But detectives connected the dots. Rick's death too clean, too soon after Charlie and Diane. Bambi, now alone, faced questions, her alibi solid as she was home with friends. Suspicion fell on an unknown killer targeting the family, but the pressure mounted. Horry County Sheriff's Office formed a task force, re-examining evidence, the family Bible now dusted for prints, though clean. Tips trickled in, one pointing to a local drifter, but alibis cleared him. The community rallied, vigils lighting up Deerfield Drive, candles flickering around photos of the Parkers and Rick, their absence a void in Little River's heart. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, born from persistence and a tip that wouldn't die. In early 2006, a confidential informant, a former cellmate of a small-time burglar named Timothy Blankenship, came forward. Blankenship, 28, had been boasting in jail about a big score in Little River, mentioning an old cop's house and a holy book he'd grabbed as a joke. Detectives zeroed in, tailing Blankenship's associates, one of whom was his cousin, James Bird, a 25-year-old with a rap sheet for theft. Bird lived in a run-down trailer on the outskirts of Myrtle Beach, his place a hub for petty crooks. Armed with a search warrant on March 15, 2006, officers raided the trailer at dawn, kicking in the door to find Bird and two others scrambling. Amid the clutter of stolen electronics and drug paraphernalia, they spotted it on a rickety shelf. The Parker family Bible, its familiar inscriptions visible under the flashlight beam. Charlie's birth in 1939, Diane's wedding vows, Bambi's baptism. The book was unmistakable, its pages marked with family notes, a relic Bird couldn't explain. Found it at a yard sale, he stammered, but fingerprints lifted from the cover matched his, and inside, tucked between Genesis and Exodus, was a photo of the Parkers at Christmas, blood-flecked from the chaos. Bird's arrest cracked the case wide open. Under interrogation, he broke after hours, tears streaming as he confessed to the Parkers' murders with Blankenship and a third man, Michael Wise, 30. The trio, desperate for cash to fuel their meth habit, had cased the neighborhood, spotting the Parkers' unlocked door during a prior burglary attempt. Charlie's resistance sealed their fate. The men panicked, shooting him and Diane to silence witnesses. The Bible? Bird admitted grabbing it impulsively, thinking it might hold cash, a stupid trophy from the kill. Rick's murder was retaliation. He'd seen Bird's truck near the Parkers that night, whispering suspicions to Bambi, who told police. Fearing exposure, Bird ambushed Rick on that rural road, staging it as a robbery. Wise corroborated, detailing the 9mm pistol used in all three killings, hidden in a pond near the trailer. Divers recovered it, ballistics matching casings from the Parker home and Rick's truck. Blankenship, facing the death penalty, flipped, providing timelines and alibis that crumbled under scrutiny. The trials were a spectacle, gripping South Carolina in 2007. Bird's first, in Horry County, featured Bambi's tearful testimony, her voice steady as she described finding her parents, the Bible's return, a bittersweet closure. Prosecutors paraded the book in court, its weighty presence a symbol of the family's enduring legacy. Pages flipped to show inscriptions amid gasps from jurors. Bird, pale and shackled, claimed coercion, but the evidence, fingerprints, the gun, informants' tapes, overwhelmed. Convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder on June 12, 2007, he received life without parole, his appeals denied by 2010. Blankenship and Wise pleaded guilty to lesser charges, testifying against him for reduced sentences, 25 years each. Bambi watched from the gallery, clutching the Bible, now hers, its pages a bridge to her lost loved one. The community exhaled. Deerfield Drive quieter, but safer. The Parkers' home sold to a family who honored its memory with a plaque. Little River healed slowly, the case a cautionary tale of vulnerability and paradise. Bambi remarried, starting a foundation in her parents' name for senior safety. Her strength, a light in the darkness. The Bible, passed down, held new entries. Rick's obituary, Bambi's triumphs, a testament to survival. A testament to survival. Datline's 2008 episode, The Bible and the Bullet, captured it all. Keith Morrison's narration weaving the horror and hope, the warrant's discovery, a pivotal twist. True crime fans revisited on streaming, the story's rhythm of loss and justice resonating. Charlie and Diane, forever young in photos, watched over from memory, their legacy unbroken by bullets or time. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the locker room of Northern Granville High School in Oxford, North Carolina, casting a pale glow over the rows of metal lockers where Russell Stager stored his coaching gear. It was early 1988, and Russell, a 39-year-old physical education teacher and beloved football coach, sat alone on a wooden bench, his broad shoulders slumped under the weight of unspoken fears. His whistle hung around his neck, a symbol of the discipline he instilled in his players. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere, tangled in the growing shadows of his marriage. Barbara Stager, his wife of nearly 2 years, had been his rock after his first wife's death, a fellow teacher with a warm smile and a reputation for baking pies for school events. But lately, her moods had shifted, her words laced with resentment over money troubles and his long hours at practice. Russell, a man of quiet strength with a mustache framing his earnest face, had started noticing things, small arguments that escalated too quickly, her questions about his life insurance policy asked with an intensity that chilled him. He pulled a small cassette recorder from his gym bag, his hands steady despite the knot in his stomach, and pressed record, his voice low and measured as he spoke into the microphone. "If anything happens to me, Barbara did it," he said, the words hanging heavy in the empty room. He described her rages, the way she'd once threatened him with a gun during an argument, her obsession with financial security. The tape ended with a click, and Russell slipped it into his locker, number 47, behind a stack of old playbooks, a secret safeguard he hoped he'd never need. He locked it tight, grabbed his keys, and headed home to the modest ranch house on Green Hill Road, where Barbara waited with dinner on the table, her smile masking the storm brewing inside. Russell and Barbara's life together had started with promise, a second chance for both after personal losses. Russell's first wife, Mary Ruth, had died in 1982 from a sudden illness, leaving him to raise their 2 young sons, Jason and Chris, with the help of his parents. Barbara, a 47-year-old English teacher at a nearby school, had lost her first husband years earlier and brought her own son, Larry, into the blend. They met through mutual friends at a church event, bonding over shared grief and a love for small-town life. By 1986, they married in a simple ceremony, settling into Russell's home where laughter filled the evenings as the boys played outside. Russell coached the high school football team, his enthusiasm infectious, turning average players into winners with his motivational talks. Barbara supported him, cheering at games and hosting team barbecues, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Money was tight. Russell's salary covered the basics, but Barbara dreamed of more, eyeing retirement and security. She managed the household finances, her ledgers meticulous, and often pressed him about increasing his life insurance, a conversation that left him uneasy. Friends noticed her sharp tongue during arguments, how she'd accuse him of neglecting the family for football, her eyes flashing with anger that faded as quickly as it came. As spring turned to summer in 1988, Russell's suspicions deepened. He confided in a close friend during a late-night practice, whispering about Barbara's collection of guns. handguns and rifles she'd inherited or bought for protection. One incident stood out. Months earlier, heated fight over bills. Barbara had pulled a .25 caliber pistol from her purse, pointing it at him with a steady hand, her voice cold as she said, "You think I'm bluffing." Russell had talked her down, but the memory lingered. Russell had talked her down, but the memory lingered, fueling his paranoia. He began documenting everything, jotting notes in a hidden journal about her moods, her questions about his will. The tape in the locker was his boldest move, a desperate bid to protect his sons if the worst happened. He drove home that night, the cassette's weight metaphorical now, and found Barbara in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour from baking. She kissed him hello, her touch affectionate, but Russell's smile was forced, his mind replaying his recorded words. They ate dinner together, the boys chattering about school, the normalcy a thin veil over the unease gnawing at him. Bedtime came, and as they lay in the dark, Barbara's breathing even beside him, Russell stared at the ceiling, wondering if he'd overreacted or if his instincts were spot on. The night of August 1, 1988, started like any other Monday. Russell returned from coaching around 10 p.m., tired but content after a good practice. Barbara had prepared a light supper, and they chatted about the upcoming season, her interest feigned but polite. The boys were asleep in their rooms, the house quiet except for the tick of the clock in the hallway. Around 1 a.m., a single gunshot shattered the silence, the sound muffled but unmistakable. Neighbors a block away heard it, mistaking it for a car backfiring, but in the Stager home, it was the end. Russell lay in bed, a bullet wound in his chest, blood soaking the sheets as he gasped his last breath. Barbara, jolted awake, claimed she thought he was an intruder, grabbing her gun from the nightstand and firing in panic. She called 911 at 1:07 a.m., her voice hysterical as she screamed for help, describing how she'd shot her husband by mistake. Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing Russell to Durham Regional Hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival, the .25 caliber bullet having pierced his heart. Barbara sobbed to officers, her nightgown stained with blood, insisting it was an accident, her hands shaking as she recounted the terror of the dark figure in their room. The investigation began immediately. Granville County Sheriff's deputies swarming the scene, their flashlights illuminating the bedroom where blood spattered the walls and floor. The house, with its cozy living room and family photos, felt violated, the air thick with grief and suspicion. Barbara explained the gun was loaded for safety, a habit from her first marriage, and she'd fired blindly when Russell stirred beside her. But deputies noted inconsistencies. The bullet's trajectory suggested the gun was fired from close range, point blank, not in panic. Russell's body showed no defensive wounds, and the bedroom door was locked from inside, ruling out an intruder. Barbara's story shifted slightly under questioning, but she stuck to accident, her tears genuine to some. Autopsy confirmed the wound was fatal, the bullet matching her Colt .25, found on the nightstand with one spent casing. Friends rallied around her, remembering Russell's warnings, but dismissing them as marital spat. The boys, Jason 15 and Chris 13, were devastated, clinging to their stepmother as she comforted them, her role as family anchored intact for now. Word of the tape surfaced days later, during the cleanup of Russell's locker at school. A colleague, helping clear his belongings, found the cassette behind the playbooks, its label blank but the contents chilling. Principal John Harrison listened first, his face paling as Russell's voice filled the office. "Barbara's going to kill me for the insurance money. She's tried before. The school notified police, and the tape became evidence. Russell's posthumous testimony against his wife. Detectives re-interviewed Barbara, playing excerpts, but she denied everything, calling it paranoia from stress. The case built slowly, forensics showing powder burns on Russell's nightshirt, consistent with close-range fire, not a wild shot. Barbara's financial records revealed she'd recently increased his life insurance, naming herself beneficiary for $100,000, a payout that raised eyebrows. Whispers from her past emerged. Her first husband, John Stager, had died in 1978 from a hunting accident, a shotgun blast to the head while cleaning his gun, ruled accidental but now under scrutiny. Barbara collected $75,000 then, enough to start over. Patterns emerged, her calm demeanor, after both deaths eerily similar. The grand jury indicted Barbara in October 1988 on first-degree murder. The tape, the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Pre-trial hearings in Oxford drew crowds, the small town buzzing with gossip about the Black Widow teacher. Barbara, composed in court, her hair neatly styled, maintained innocence, her lawyer arguing self-defense and mental strain. The trial began March 1989 in Durham County, moved for impartiality. Judge Henry Fry presiding over a packed courtroom. Prosecutors, led by Durable to Chuck Kitchen, opened with the tape, Russell's voice booming. "She's dangerous. Check my locker if I'm gone." Jurors shifted uncomfortably, the raw plea hitting hard. Witnesses testified to Barbara's temper, neighbors recalling arguments where she'd scream about money, a coworker mentioning her fascination with true crime shows about widows. Financial experts detailed the insurance windfalls, totaling over $200,000 across both husbands. Motive clear as day. Barbara took the stand, her voice steady, tearfully describing the night. "I woke to a noise, saw a shadow, and fire. It was Russ. Oh God, it was Russ." Cross-examination cracked her, the dial pressing on the gun's position, the locked door, her quick call to insurance agents post-death. Defense painted Russell as controlling, the tape a product of paranoia from his grief over Mary Ruth. But the jury, after days of deliberation, saw through it. On March 25, 1989, guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole, Barbara showed no emotion, her eyes distant as she was led away, the courtroom erupting in murmurs. The boys, now with relatives, struggled with the truth, Jason later saying the tape freed them from doubt. Barbara appealed, claiming ineffective counsel, but courts upheld in 1991. She died in prison in 2013 from cancer, 78 years old. Her story, a cautionary tale. Oxford healed slowly, Russell's memory honored with a plaque at the field. His voice on that tape, a final act of courage. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows. The summer evening in Saginaw, Michigan, wrapped around the quiet streets like a warm embrace. The air filled with the distant hum of lawn mowers and the sweet scent of blooming lilacs. It was July 25th, 1991, and Shannon Moore, a 23-year-old flight attendant with a radiant smile and auburn hair that caught the sunlight, climbed into the passenger seat of her fiancé Keith Bushy's pickup truck. Her blue eyes sparkled with the excitement of their recent engagement, a diamond ring glinting on her finger as she leaned over to kiss him goodbye. Shannon had just finished a shift at the airport, her uniform still crisp, and she was heading home to their shared apartment on Mackinac Street, a cozy place filled with dreams of a future wedding and starting a family. Keith, a 28-year-old construction worker with a sturdy build and a quiet demeanor, watched her go, his hand lingering on the steering wheel. But Shannon never made it inside. As she walked up the driveway, a neighbor later recalled hearing a muffled argument, voices rising then falling silent. Hours passed, and when Keith returned around midnight, he found her gone. Her car still parked outside, her purse untouched on the kitchen counter. Panic set in as he called the police, his voice trembling over the line, claiming she'd vanished without a trace. But deep down, those who knew Shannon sensed something more sinister, a story woven with secrets that would unravel over years of heartbreak and relentless pursuit. Shannon's life had always been one of quiet determination, a young woman from a close-knit family in Delta, Michigan, who chased her dreams with unwavering spirit. At 23, she was thriving, her job with Northwest Airlines taking her to cities she'd only read about, her laughter lighting up the cockpit as she bantered with pilots. She met Keith through mutual friends at a local bar, drawn to his steady job and promises of stability after a string of failed relationships. They moved in together quickly, her parents, Jerry, and Kathy Moore, meeting him with cautious approval, sensing his possessiveness, but hoping love would smooth the edge. Shannon confided in her best friend, Michelle, about small red flags, Keith's jealousy over her male co-workers, his questions about her schedule that felt more like surveillance than care. But she brushed them off, her optimism shining through as she planned their October wedding, picking out dresses and dreaming of a house with a yard for kids. That night in July, as she stepped from the truck, Keith's goodbye kiss lingered a second too long, his eyes holding hers with an intensity she attributed to affection. Little did she know, it was the last time anyone would see her alive, her vibrant spirit snuffed out in the shadows of their own home. Keith's story to police was polished, almost rehearsed. He claimed Shannon had left upset after a minor argument about wedding plans, suggesting she might have gone to a friend's or driven off impulsively. Officers searched the apartment, finding no signs of struggle, her keys on the table, her favorite earrings beside the sink. But something nagged at them, the way Keith paced, his hands fidgeting, his alibi for the evening vague, mentioning drinks with buddies, but no names or times. Neighbors reported seeing his truck leave around 10 p.m., hours after dropping her off, circling the block before vanishing into the night. The Saginaw Township Police Department launched a missing persons investigation. Posters of Shannon's smiling face plastered across stores and lampposts, her description broadcast on local news. 5'6", 120 pounds. 5'6", 120 pounds. Last seen in a blue skirt and white blouse. Tips poured in, friends recalling Keith's controlling nature, one saying Hannon had whispered fears of his temper during a girls' night out. Kathy Moore, her mother, refused to believe her daughter ran away, insisting Shannon would never leave without her purse or a word. Jerry, a stoic factory worker, drove the streets nightly, his flashlight sweeping ditches and fields, his heart breaking with every empty mile. Days turned to weeks, the summer heat giving way to autumn chills, and Shannon's absence carved a void in her family's lives. Keith played the grieving fiancé, organizing searches and pleading on TV, his tears convincing Some, but not Kathy, who noticed his quick move to pack Shannon's things, donating her clothes as if closing a chapter. Private investigators hired by the Moores dug into Keith's past, uncovering a trail of lies. He'd been married before, divorced amid accusations of infidelity, and had a history of bar fights that hinted at a darker side. Then, on September 20th, 1991, a hunter in a remote field near Hemlock Township, 20 miles from Saginaw, stumbled upon a shallow grave, a woman's body wrapped in a blanket, decomposed but identifiable by dental records as Shannon. The scene was grim, her skull fractured from blunt force trauma, wrists bound with duct tape, signs of a struggle etched in the soil around her. Coroner ruled it homicide, the cause a savage beating, perhaps with a hammer or tire iron. Her death estimated around July 25, the very night she disappeared. Police descended, exhuming the body under floodlights, collecting fibers from the blanket that matched one from Keith's truck. The arrest came swiftly. Keith hauled in on September 22nd, his face paling as officers read the charges. First-degree murder. He maintained innocence, claiming an unknown intruder killed Shannon during a burglary gone wrong, but evidence mounted like storm clouds. Fibers from the grave linked to his apartment carpet, dirt under his nails matching the field soil, and a witness placing his truck near the burial site that night. Interrogations revealed cracks. Keith's story shifted, first saying he dropped her off, then admitting an argument but denying violence. Prosecutors painted a picture of obsession turned deadly. Keith, enraged by Shannon's talk of postponing the wedding over his jealousy, followed her inside, bludgeoning her in a rage, then driving her body to the field under cover of darkness. The Moores sat through pretrial hearings, Kathy clutching Shannon's photo, her eyes never leaving Keith. The community rallied, vigils lighting the streets, whispers of domestic violence turning to outrage. Keith's trial began in March 1992 in Saginaw County Circuit Court. Judge Robert L. Kaczmarek presiding over a packed room, the air thick with tension. Prosecutors opened with the timeline, detailing Keith's movements that night, phone records showing calls to friends, asking if they'd seen Shannon, his voice casual too soon. Forensic experts testified to the trauma, multiple blows to the head, defensive wounds on her arms, the duct tape suggesting restraint. A co-worker recalled Shannon's bruises weeks earlier, hidden under makeup, her voice hesitant as she described Keith's grip tightening during arguments. Keith took the stand, his voice steady, tearfully recounting their last moments. A kiss goodbye, her wave as she walked away, his shock at her disappearance. But cross-examination unraveled him, the DA pressing on the fibers, the dirt, the lack of forced entry at the apartment. Defense argued reasonable doubt, suggesting a random killer or Shannon's secret lover, but the jury, after 3 days, saw through the smoke. On April 10, 1992, guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole. Keith showed no emotion, led away in cuffs, while the Moores embraced, Kathy's sobs echoing in the hall. But the story didn't end there, twists emerging like weeds in a garden. Keith appealed, claiming ineffective counsel and new evidence, a supposed alibi witness who recanted under scrutiny. In 1994, the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned the conviction on a technicality. The duct tape evidence was mishandled. Chain of custody broken. Retrial loomed. The Moore's hope dashed as Keith walked free on bond, the community seething. He moved to a small town, laying low, but private eyes tailed him, Kathy vowing he'd pay. The second trial in 1996 brought fresh witnesses, one neighbor testifying to hearing thuds and a woman's cry that night, another spotting Keith's truck on a back road. Forensics advanced, mitochondrial DNA from the blanket fibers matching Keith's hair with near certainty. The jury deliberated longer, but on June 5, 1996, guilty again, life sentence reaffirmed. Appeals dragged into the 2000s, Keith filing writ after writ, but courts upheld his freedom of memory. Years passed, the Moores aging but unbowed. Kathy writing a book, Who Killed My Daughter, her words a testament to Shannon's life. Jerry passed in 2005, his last days haunted by the unsolved pain, but Kathy visited the grave weekly, flowers in hand. Keith, in Jackson prison, faded into obscurity, his letters to the parole board denied. Saginaw remembered Shannon with a scholarship in her name for aspiring flight attendants, her story a warning on domestic abuse. The field where she was found grew wild, a quiet marker of loss, but her spirit lived in her family's fight, a young woman whose disappearance exposed a killer's mask. As this story fades, another one waits in the shadows.